Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
There we go. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? We finally made it here to a Friday here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening, live from Denver, Colorado. Thank you for making us part of your day. We got a special one here for you to really cap off a great week. Nicholaus Alexander Fairbanks joining us for Locked On Panthers, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. I'm excited about this one because the state of hockey in Florida and the NHL, I mean, there's just so much going on. So a lot to really unpack with us. I'm excited for our guest here tonight. But I do want to end up starting with this before we introduce our guest. So, interesting stuff, okay? So I talked about this about a couple of weeks back when the initial trade for Rafael Devers to go to the San Francisco Giants ended up happening, and people were all bagging on the Boston Red Sox for the trade and going, Boston, they're a bunch of just, they don't know what they're doing. Craig Breslow is not really that smart of a guy and all the rest of it. Well, here's what ended up happening in the last previous games since the trade. So San Francisco's in. Yes, you're getting a power bat. Yes, you are getting somebody that's at least great up on offense. But you're 10-12 since the trade. You're only about 2 games on the underside. And San Francisco, as much as I do like their starting rotation with 2 of their go-to guys, the offense really hasn't quite clicked a lot to at least score up runs. Whereas in Boston's case, since you got rid of Rafael Devers and you got rid of potentially the cancer out of the locker room, they're 12-9. And most people, this is why with the whole Luka trade to the Lakers, okay, this is why I told people, pump your brakes for a second. Yes, Luka's highly offensively talented. Yes, we understand that he's going to be, a big international name next to Jokic and Giannis and even Wemby. But what I mentioned about this is that we know the Lakers are wildly a big top-tier brand, much like the Dallas Cowboys. But the problem with the Lakers is that they did not have the backcourt defense. They didn't have the size. Jackson Hayes was getting literally, obliterated. And all of you all thought, Lakers up in 5, Lakers up in 5. You'll win home in 5, okay? And that's because there was no defense. And you keep telling me about Anthony Davis being Mr. Glass, can't seem to stay healthy, can't do all this and that, when you forget about that when he's healthy, he could play both the 4 and the 5. So Dallas, when you look at their roster today, and even when they drafted Cooper Flagg, and by the way, he looks pretty good in the summer leagues, doesn't he? So to me, Dallas looks like a very good roster. You take away the injuries. They're good up on offense. They can pass the ball around, and they're also very good on rotations and defense. Whereas you look at right now for the Giants, so what? You ended up getting another bat. And now he wants to say the things he should have said in Boston. I can go play first. I could be a DH. Because, like I said, Gabby Maljanian, that was on here with Locked On Red Sox, was saying the best thing possible, that if Rafi Devers was a DH, look at how the career turned out for David Ortiz. He was a first baseman in Minnesota. He was the first baseman up in Red Sox before they ended up getting Kevin Nicholaus. And, hey, he's offensive. That's why you wanted to keep the bat. But for Devers, he wanted more of the money. That's why if you wanted to go back in time of who you wanted to pay more, Xander Bogaerts or Rafael Devers, I wish we would have taken Bogaerts. Because at this point, you now know with what's on his mindset, and the Giants being 10-12 since then just better solidifies. You got a bat, but you didn't quite get the best mindset in the locker room. That's why Boston looks completely different. They called up their number one prospect, Roman Anthony, Jarren Duran. I mean, many people are inquiring about him being up and into the trade deadline, but do you really make that risk to trade him? I mean, it's hard. And Boston, they are often, the questionable team of whether they actually stay a couple months red hot or they end up getting cold at the worst moments in the time where you're going into the postseason and you need to be red hot. Pitching has to be clicking. Offense has to be consistent in scoring up runs. And what you're seeing right now just best solidifies exactly what I told people when it came to the Luka Doncic trade. The Lakers won the long term. But if you really want to talk about the short term, look at what's happening in Dallas. You got to pump your brakes in thinking these guys don't know what they're doing. And you got to get the entire context of it all. That's why it's important. I mean, look, I'm bringing up the next guest. I really thought that when it came to Brad Marchand, when he came to Florida, I thought this was going to be awkward. Okay, we know Brad Marchand for a long time, but it worked. Gave them a Stanley Cup championship, second time in a row. And you know what? They've got a great chemistry. They got a great core, and it's only going to get better from here. So that's why it's like sometimes you have to evaluate what is inside the locker room, the chemistry that's all around you, and whether or not this works to win a championship. And that's what Boston's telling you. 12-9 right now versus a 10-12 San Francisco Giants team. Don't sit here and tell me that Rafael Devers ended up winning the entirety of the trade when you know damn well that they ended up winning those games and they got the cancer up and out the locker room. And I told people, just pump the brakes here for a second before you end up making judgments. As far as us being in a caffeinated society, we deal with this all the time. Like, take a second, reevaluate, and find the entirety of the context before you end up pointing out, oh, yeah, that team won the trade. Because trust me, I wait till the end of the year. So that's just me. That's just how, as America's honesty mind, this is why I can't lie to my fans. I cannot lie to my audience. Because at the end of the day, you got to get to the cold-hearted truth. And that's what you're starting to witness right now. And I'm holding my breath until we get into potentially the postseason. So, I talked about this a lot in the last couple of weeks, and we really discussed about where the state of the NHL is really going for the future, and I've loved the Four Nations tournament. I absolutely loved how the postseason went about. But, of course, 6 straight years that we've had a Florida team between Tampa and the Florida Panthers representing the Stanley Cup final, and now back-to-back. And to join us and discuss this on the state of hockey in the state of Florida, here is Nicholaus Alexander Fairbanks joining us on. Listen, Nick, it's got to feel great in South Beach, doesn't it? And listen, like, I'm looking at the state of sports as a whole because everybody's all looking at when are the Dolphins really going to start winning playoff games? When are we ever going to see the Tampa Bay Rays really get back into the World Series again? And listen, I mean, they made it into 2, and I never questioned their pitching. Their pitching staff always seems to get better sometimes. We talk about this with the Marlins. I hadn't seen energy, in the building since 2003. But then I look at the state of hockey in Florida. Lightning end up winning back-to-back, and now the Florida Panthers win back-to-back. Is it just that, and I know Gary Bettman was explaining this because a lot of people were like, nobody truthfully paid attention to hockey in the state of Florida because we remember when they first got one with Tampa Bay in 2004. And it was like, okay, they stamped their mark, and now it's like people are looking, I'm like, how in the world are they doing this? Like, how can you best explain how good it feels to know that the state of hockey in Florida is just thriving as it is?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. I will say it is an aberration right now with what is going on. Nobody, even myself, being a fan of the Panthers, thought that this day would ever come. You know, we're used to having roster turnover, management turnover, ownership turnover, and finally something stuck about 2013, 2014, where they got serious and they wanted to build something and they wanted to put the money behind it. I do have to give the Lightning their props as well, because they've been a top organization in the NHL for the past 20 years. They've shown that they can be the class of the NHL, and they have their 3 cups to prove it. They're the only other team in the last, decade to go to 3 Stanley Cup finals outside of the Florida Panthers. So there's definitely a culture and there's definitely an excitement down here that I've never seen before. Me being from Chicago, knowing how the Blackhawks did everything in the 2010s, it's a little bit different down here. It's something like it's new, but it feels vaguely familiar that it's been here for a very long time.
It's interesting, Nick, and I go back to this because I go back to when the coaching hires happened, because I felt like Florida and Vegas slam dunked on their hirings. The fact that you get Paul Maurice, who, when watching his identity in Winnipeg, it was just like totally pro offense. A guy that gets another one of his best goaltenders, aside from Connor Hellebuck, now getting Sergei Bobrovsky. And then he just has a very good defensive unit, and they get physical. And, and then, of course, witnessing Bruce Cassidy hoist the trophy for the first time in Vegas's history in 6 years, it just tells you how good that a matching identity, like a match made in heaven for coaching, really matters for a lot of these, for a lot of this roster. So when first hiring Paul Maurice, I said, give this puppy enough time to where you get the impactful players. His identity is going to show, because it's the same thing we saw up in Winnipeg, but he now has the guys that can get over the hump. And 2 Stanley Cups later, Paul Maurice is just like up and on cloud 9 at this point. So how could you describe this identity with Paul Maurice? And it just felt like everything just came into fruition so quickly.
So I think the biggest thing you have to take from Paul Maurice is that he knows when to step aside. He knows when to let the bench take over. And his biggest thing that he always talks about in his interviews is, hey, I'm just back here to make line changes. The team is what drives the actual bench and what happens during the game. But, I think it took him a lot of years to really learn that and actually really practice it, because he did come from Winnipeg. I mean, he was there for 8 long years. They had a lot of expectations up there, and unfortunately they just didn't, make it to where they wanted to. And, I have to give him props to actually stepping down, knowing like, hey, what I'm doing, my voice is not working. So I am going to step away from the game, and I'm going to step away from this team because they need something different. Now, coming to Florida, you have a President's Trophy winning team. What are you going to do to make that team better? Obviously, they got knocked out in the first round by the Tampa Bay Lightning, or second round, Tampa Bay Lightning. That was a sweep. And from there, you just knew Florida had to make a change. They needed an identity. They needed to be physical. They needed something that was going to be different than what they were used to. Bill Zito makes the trade for Matthew Tkachuk, and the rest is basically history. You have the dogs to go to war with, and now you have the leader that lets them lead the way.
It's funny. I go back to that Matthew Tkachuk trade, and I'm just like, I mean, it had to have been hard, moving on from Jonathan Huberdeau, who was 100-point, career season, and then just to go and get another impactful offensive player who he's a monster in the cage, just waiting to be let loose. And then all of a sudden, it's like Tkachuk just absolutely loves and thrives here up in South Beach. And so, I think about this because, I start to think about what goes through up in Alexander Barkov's head, because the fact is, being a captain in this organization for as long as he has, it was going to take some time. I mean, you start with the franchise that it was very fresh, gets at least their first appearance, but then it's like, okay, how do we build upon that? I start thinking about like Aaron Ekblad and a couple others that, came in the organization, was not quite hitting exactly the levels until they finally fixed up the roster that Zito put together. So when you think of Alexander Barkov and his leadership as a captain, I think a lot of that is just He's not there, truthfully, for the spotlight. He's not there to really try to, take over control. I think when the opportunity presents itself, he will do the one of two things. He will either be able to lead by example, or he allows everyone else around him to really get the best of their abilities as well. Is that kind of true about him?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's known as the silent leader in that team. I mean, he's very funny. If you ever get to a chance to speak with him or see any of his interviews, he's very snarky. And I think what happened between, when Huberdeau was traded, because they were best buds. I mean, they were on the line with Jaromir Jagr, and that's really when they started really understanding how to play the game at a professional way. I think from there to the trade with Tkachuk, what had happened was all the pressure kind of was able to come off of him. All the eyes were on him. He had to perform. He had to put up points. He was the icon here in South Florida for hockey. Now you have this other guy coming in who's got the attitude, he's got the physical play, and he has everything that you want in a hockey player. Now Alexander can just go off, lead the team how he feels confident in leading, and secondly, he can allow the team to be themselves. He doesn't have to fake being somebody he's not. Matthew allows that room to be who they are. And on top of that, finally, Barkov can actually go out there and do what's best for him. He can play defense. He doesn't have to worry about scoring every time, because you know what? If you look at the last two cup finals and a couple playoff runs, the top scorers on each team have been limited to maybe 1 or 2 goals per series. And if you can't, wrap your mind around that in hockey sense, I don't know what sport you're watching.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, each and every one of those has a bigger meaning to it, especially when you get into the playoffs, because every one of those moments matter, because that's what really becomes the game changer. So let's talk about Brad Marchand while we're up and on this topic, because to me, look, I obviously things were just going kind of downhill with Boston. I don't know what really happened with their identity. I used to think of them as the traditional, physical, in your face, and find ways to score. Because again, I love David Pastrnak, and I do like some of their offense players, but it felt like once, Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara, once they left the building, it was like, what is their chemistry really going to be like? So when they put the C on Marchand, I was like, okay, this is a little interesting, because considering that Brad Marchand likes to get in everybody's heads, and he's kind of a bit, he's kind of a bit quirky in my opinion, where I look at what he does, and so when he goes to Florida, I'm putting this on record, Nick. I was a little afraid at first, because I was like, look, this is such a strong chemistry. Why would you bring somebody up and into here that I'm not even sure that chemistry is going to mesh? I was wrong. And then all of a sudden he contributed the best way, to where it was like how he contributed in the 2011 Stanley Cup. What kind of turned things around there for Brad Marchand, and what really clicked for him once he got here?
So I'll say 2 things about that. Number one, I think that his desire to stay in Boston really drove him to actually, give up some of the money he was asking for to actually want to stay as a Boston Bruin. However, I think management made their decision saying, hey, we don't want to pay you. So you know what, we'll find the best opportunity for you. So I think getting traded not only to Florida, but a rival who's knocked you out the last 2 years in the playoffs and eliminated and basically embarrassed you after having the record of all records in the NHL for the NHL season. I think it more or less gave him a fire underneath him, understanding hey, I just got let go from the team that I was with for my whole career. I was the captain of, and they didn't even want to budge on things that I was asking for, even though I was budging for them. And then secondly, I think he was healthy. It took him a while to get back into the swing of things. I mean, he had played for Boston for a little bit, but his health was not good coming into the season. But after the Panthers went a couple weeks without playing with him, they inserted him in, started playing him a little softly on the third line. And as soon as the playoffs went, they already knew what was going to happen. You have Lundell, you have Luostarinen, those 2 cogs on the third line. You have the best third line in the NHL there that could be most teams' second lines. And from there, it was just gravy.
Oh, man. Like I said, it makes such a difference, to where it's like you kind of and usually with you covering as long as you have for this team, when you get into that locker room and you start to really evaluate, and that's what I love the moment of it is like you evaluate, you know what? They got such a solid core. Like they're very gelled. They understand each other and they know exactly what the task is up and at hand. And so to see that and to really, make that difference maker for them to go and win a championship, I think is just what's so important when you come into the trade deadline. Let's talk about Bobby. Because to me, when I first saw the signing a couple of years back, obviously nobody wants to remember about the first year, and I get it. But to me, I'm like, look, don't look at this as a terrible signing. Usually, at times, first years are always rough. But once you get comfortable in the next couple of years, that's where things really start to click on. Are you impressed by just the jump of what Sergei Bobrovsky has done now since the first year he signed with this Florida Panthers team, and how now it's like the guy's unstoppable the minute that you end up going against him in the playoffs?
Most definitely. So, I mean, his first 2.5 years down in Sunrise, it was a mind game for him, unfortunately. You could tell that his confidence wasn't there. He was really hard on himself because of the contract. He knew how much he was making, how much the team depended on him, and he was not showing up and giving it his all. So I honestly think, number one, with the coaching change with Paul Maurice, and then secondly, just with a new defensive structure that they brought out, it made him more confident in not only himself, but the team around him. Every time he stops the puck, you always see him patting his guys on the back, saying thanks for, helping me out or boxing out. But you can just see there is a different dimension to him now. And if anybody had any questions about, number one, how he was going to perform in the playoffs, but secondly, if he was going to be a Hall of Fame goaltender, the last 2 seasons, actually last 3 seasons through the playoffs, I think have cemented that conversation. So as you were saying, give things a little bit of time, new surroundings, new team, new everything. You got to become yourself, and you have to be comfortable where you're at. And having that pressure of that contract was not helping, but you know what? He came back and he found himself, and look where he is now.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I think future Hall of Famer and somebody that like top 10 goalie right now up and in this league. I mean, it's very safe to say and very fair to say. So looking at it, over 30 years, U.S. has really dominated up and into the sport since Canada last won their Stanley Cup. And obviously getting a back-to-back matchup between Florida and Edmonton. My thing with this is that eventually a Canadian team will win it. Who it may be, we don't know. But over the span of the 30 years, Nick, I've started to kind of see something where there were teams that obviously you had your runnings of Chicago with their dynasty of the 3 championships in the amount of years they did. The back-to-back championships between Pittsburgh and then, a 20-year revival for the Colorado Avalanche as I live here, and just seeing them win it because Nathan McKinnon he's just a freakish athlete. But the thing about it is talent from international places start to come up and into the U.S. soils because they're starting to see of chemistry-wise. The other thing is, too, because this is talked about a lot, Florida and Vegas's income taxes. There's no state taxes in Europe. So it's like, when does Canada really get a break? But I rebuttal of this. Canada, for me, is just like, they have the talents, but you just have to build the chemistry, and the price has to obviously be right. But it's like, are they ever going to get up over this hump? Because it's like U.S. is just dominating this sport now for over 30 years. What do you make of that? Because it is something that is really kind of sparked my mind when I start thinking about it, and like, man, Canada, they got to get something figured out from here.
So I don't think Canada has a problem in international play because they won the 4 nations. They win gold medals in the Olympics and everything. So I don't think that's the issue. I think it comes into when you have individual players that play for these teams that are all about themselves. You look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and the core 4 that they've had, and then one of them just left for Vegas. We're going to see how that works out. But maybe the Leafs will be better and be able to go farther in the playoffs next year without having said player on that team. So I think what it's going to come down to is that you're going to have some guys that are going to take either some pay cuts or going to have to be there for the team. And you're going to have a coach or a management style there that's going to only, basically bring that all together. I think Canada expects to win every Stanley Cup, as they should. I mean, it's their national sport. But at the same time, there's more American teams than there are Canadians, so I guess the odds are going to be against them. But at the same time, if you're not willing to build or adapt or change, then you're going to be left in the dust, and you're going to be with the old boys club, with a lot of the general managers that have gone through there. And, as you said, I think there will be a Canadian team. We just don't know when, and we don't know who, because we don't know which team has that identity right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine with the Toronto Maple Leafs, because it just seems like every year it's almost like I'm hearing the same voice with Dallas Cowboys. Every year seems to be their year. But final question before letting you go is, to me, I thought this was a great year for hockey. It really was. I mean, the fact that the Four Nations tournament just blew everything up out of the water. I mean, it had the best ratings versus the NBA All-Star game. And to me, it was like initially, like the moment that really sparked me was, of course, the initial fight between Canada and US. It's like, that's a classic. You got to love that. And so now, the next year we have obviously our Olympic teams. So now you're going to have all of these representative players in the NHL going and playing for their respective countries. So to me, I feel like the state of hockey is just thriving. And new CBA, you've already signed a new television deal with Canada. And then at the same time, we're getting talks of expansion. So I feel like in the next 5 years, Nick, I mean, I don't try to belittle NBA. I don't try to do any of that. But my thing is like NBA has to cut their games down. And at the same time, find some consistency with the time slots, because it's like, we know the initial months, right? Like by the winter time, it's all NFL. And then by the time you get into the initial start, people are going to watch, the NHL here and there. But I love the Four Nations that everybody started tuning in. So I think in the next 5 years, and correct me up on this, but this is their moment. Just like I look at the WNBA, where you're getting new money, you're getting new viewerships, maybe potentially some new sponsorships, and some new teams up and along the way. I mean, a relocated team now in Utah with the Mammoth, and maybe some new teams up and along the horizon. Maybe some revival teams. I mean, are we talking Atlanta? Are we talking maybe the correction and fixing in Arizona? Maybe there might even be some new ones in places we never even thought about, right?
Yeah, and I like to equate this kind of like what's been going down in Florida. They're showing that hockey does work in the Sun Belt and everything. I mean, the top teams this year were basically all below, Tennessee and everything. So in the last 3-4 winners, you have Vegas, Florida, and Colorado, and Tampa, I'll add in there, are all just, they're way south. You wouldn't think that there would be any kind of interest in hockey or any kind of money in it, and here you are. I think the state of hockey right now, it was at its peak probably when the Blackhawks, the LA Kings, and the Boston Bruins were winning cups, and even with Pittsburgh as well. But now we're ushering into a new era now where you have, your Matthew Tkachuk's, you have Brady Tkachuk's coming in, you have Austin Matthews, who's a player from the U.S. from Arizona. So now you're getting players from these areas to actually play. They're big names now, and you're just showing interest in how the game can grow. Now that you have that growth coming in, what do you do next with it? Do you try to magnify it down and try to just make sure that players go to certain teams? Or do you try to expand on that and grow the game even more? And I think that's something that Gary Bettman probably doesn't get enough credit for, just because a lot of people think he's the anti-Canada. Well, unfortunately, it's been working for the league. And, finally, I think the big thing about it is that with the Four Nations, I think it ushered in a new fandom for regular non-hockey fans. And they'll be looking forward to the Olympics and then any other event after that to really get into the game a little bit more. And I'm actually excited to see if there will be a fight in the Olympics, even though I know it's not it's not one of the regular things that you would ever see.
Could you imagine just like, reliving Miracle, and it's just like, Russia against US, and then all of a sudden it's just a back and forth check game? I mean, that is one that, like, I can't take my eyes off television with this if it's going to be that kind of game, because you got to love some physical play up and in here. But no, I remember going to an all-star game festivity when I lived in my hometown in Vegas, and I loved it. The festivities was great, but the fact that, like, what we got up in the Four Nations makes me feel like, if we can have these in some of these designated areas so that people kind of get an idea like, hey, you get one up in Canada, you get one up in the U.S. soil, maybe you get one up in international waters, whatever it may be. I feel like that might actually spark a little bit of like that intriguing kind of mindset if they do something like that. Maybe something in the works, but yeah, I mean, I kind of like the idea and the thought.
It kind of sounds like UFC. They're taking a playbook
Yes.
out of them, or boxing back in the day, where they were fighting over in DR Congo and everything. So I think if hockey were to be able to expand and use that playbook correctly, they could be again a top 4 sport in the United States here. So I guess the ground is the limit for them, and we'll see if there's a leadership change here in the next couple of years, if they actually take that and run with it, instead of what basketball or NBA has done, and to an extent what MLB has done as well. So it's a very exciting time now. Anybody who's maybe watching your show or watching this right now, highly recommend actually just watching some of the past playoff games and understanding what the game is, what it takes to win the cup, and then on top of that, pick a team, man. We're all fans here. We all love hockey fans. I mean, we might get rowdy with each other, but at the end of the day, if you're a hockey fan, I love you.
Absolutely. And you know what? I tell people all the time, being born and raised in Vegas, when the Golden Knights first came here in 2017, I paid attention a bit when it came to my family being in New York, watching the Rangers, and then kind of watching a little bits and pieces of the Sharks. But once the Knights broke ground, we all know the whole story of the first year. I will be a fan for life. And honestly, what they've done with the community and why it's like hockey's so classy. These guys can just tighten up their ties. They're walking into the best suits, and whatever souped up sports car they bring in, it doesn't matter. As long as they're classy on and off the ice, and, could get a little bit rowdy here and there. But you know what? How can you not love that feeling of hockey? That's like the best feeling up and in the world. And you know what? Screw it. I love that you brought it up with UFC. Give hockey an island, okay? Give them its own island ring somewhere. Nick, appreciate the time, you being here up and onto the show. And so for our audiences, where can people tap in for them back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers all season long?
Jake, again, thank you for having me on. You guys can follow me on X at Prudentia0, or if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, it's Bure1096. So anyways, have a good offseason and everything, and good luck to the Golden Knights if I don't speak with you between now and then.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you for coming on by. Enjoy the rest of the week and the weekend, man, and we'll see you come next season when the puck drops for a brand new season of hockey. Take care, my friend.
You too. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it, is that, the state of hockey is just going to grow further and further and even better. And I'm excited and ecstatic about it because new expansion teams, like, look, I feel for a lot of the diehard Arizona Coyotes fans. I really do. But living here in Colorado, I was excited that Utah got a team because it's like we got similar climates. We got really beautiful weather, if you think about it. But the ownership, that's the same one that owned the Jazz. These guys are, they're top tier. They're very fan base friendly. They really are, because the prices are no longer straining your wallet. But you can enjoy the experiences of it all. That's why I'm like, how could you not get excited about this? I know Canada feels a certain type of way because they have to wait another year to finally win a Stanley Cup and really win a championship since 2019 with the Toronto Raptors. Like, that's the one hard part. But eventually we will get one. It's only just about a matter of time. Really appreciate our guest up and on here. So, listen, folks, we've been stamping our mark for the Snake Sports Talk Show for over 5+ years running. But so has Maker's Mark. Since 1950, Maker's Mark has left their mark as being one of the top tier straight bourbon whiskey for over years. And the way that aged, the way that is distilled, and the way that everything, in every barrel cask that you end up purchasing, every bottle that you have up and on the shelf, just tells you are leaving your mark on arguably one of the best tasting whiskeys that we've got from home. Whatever you're making your mark at, make your mark with Maker's Mark, for they have made their marks as being one of the best top-tier bourbon whiskeys to gift it to you for you to trailblaze and make your mark, whatever it may be. Enjoy responsibly, 21 and over, with making your mark with a glass of classic Kentucky Straight Bourbon, Maker's Mark.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts that get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket, and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
You know, I really cannot wait for the up-and-coming NFL season, because we know that training camps have been close to being underway for a lot of respective teams. But we know, too, that there's going to be some interesting stories. There's going to be a lot of them this up-and-coming season that I'm really excited for. But to me, I think the one story that I think kind of pops out to me is, and I've been hearing this now for quite some time, is that what will be the look of the New York Giants? And Brian Daboll, I respect him as a coach. Offensive mind is arguably the reason why Josh Allen is consistent as he is, because you had to clean a lot of that mess up from Wyoming. And the one thing about it is Brian Daboll, I'm not saying he's a quarterback whisperer in some ways, like with what a Kyle Shanahan and some of these other offensive guys are. But I will say this: Brian Daboll understands and knows what he's doing when it comes to offensive sets. Okay. I have been on this topic now for the last few weeks. And Brian Daboll, to me, he gets let go and fired out of New York. Guess how many teams are honestly going to end up calling and really making that push to hire him as a coach? You really think that Jonathan Gannon is going to get things done in Arizona? He's kind of up and on treading on waters, but I'm not going to bash him that heavily, because I know Arizona, and when it comes to the Bidwells, they've just been so weird and wonky in the last few years. I mean, I watched this team go to the Super Bowl, and then I watched the team go into the playoffs, and it's just like, after that, what are they? I'm not seeing a whole lot of this, consistency. But the defense, I promise you, is going to be a lot better. They may be a team that I look forward to that has a very good defense. Offense just needs to get on the same page. That just depends on how Kyler Murray and company really work this. But for New York, they completely double down on their defensive front. And I think the reason of it is because they felt like they did not get enough of those pressures when it comes to the edge. Now you have Dexter Lawrence. You have Brian Burns. You have Kayvon Thibodeau. I thought he was going to honestly end up getting moved, but apparently that's not the case. Now you have your draft pick in Abdul Carter. So the Giants, to me, is a team that I know defensively they've been trying to get right. But the question mark is what the look of the offensive line is outside of Andrew Thomas. Because I don't trust Devin Neal. And when it comes to their run game initially, Tyrone Tracy is actually a pretty good-looking running back. But you got to pair him up. So, and then you've got an offensive unit now where you got Malik Neighbors. I'm thinking there's going to be probably a good jump out of Jalen Hyatt this year. But the question mark, of course, comes to the quarterback, because we know Russell Wilson in the last few years, and by the way, Russell did not play horribly in these last 2 seasons he's played between Denver and Pittsburgh. The problem with Pittsburgh is that Pittsburgh, their offensive identity is just so wonky, I cannot figure them out. And they let Najee Harris walk in free agency to sign a 1-year prove-it deal with the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, which, could you even imagine what that backfield will look like? So Russell, and even in his time with Sean Payton, 24 touchdowns, 8 picks. That's not a terrible season. But we've seen some of the overly cringy stuff. And that's the one thing that drove Sean Payton crazy. It drove everybody here up in Denver crazy. So once moving to Pittsburgh for a 1-year deal, you knew you were going to get a quarterback that was going to stretch the field, because unfortunately for Justin Fields and now going into New York, I'm hoping for the best of luck even with under Aaron Glenn. But Justin Fields couldn't stretch the field. Okay, he can run. He's accurate. And I think when you paired him with his former team, now you pair him with his former teammate, Garrett Wilson at Ohio State. Maybe that might build some confidence. But for Russell Wilson, Mike Tomlin, when he made that move, initially there was some sort of talks behind closed doors about the whole thing, because you know that Russell was going to stretch the field. You know that he was obviously going to make Calvin Austin and a couple others look good. Why? Because he made Tyler Lockett look good. He made a couple of other, even Jermaine Kearse look good, because it was that throw it up, go and get it, and even up and on those routes, because he will throw to wherever the wide receiver breaks. If the wide receiver does not break in that route to going and getting the football, that's where a lot of your mistakes are. But we know Russell is interesting, a little bit cringy, and I just think with this whole idea now with New York, because his wife Sierra's got to love it. You're up and in the Big Apple, big time brands. There's lots to show for. But with Jackson Dart, and this is what I've had to tell everybody, is Jackson Dart is athletic. Okay. I do think I've seen the spurts up in the Senior Bowl where he's got the accuracy. He can honestly sling the ball. The problem of it was up in Ole Miss is that there were part of it that Lane Kiffin couldn't even get consistently right. And so that's where it led to a lot of those mistakes. And Jackson Dart, there were a lot of things that were actually very good positive upsides. They weren't really negatives. So I don't understand why people think that Jackson Dart isn't really truthfully going to be a better version of himself. I mean, you think it was easy for Josh Allen to coach him out of the recklessness out of Wyoming? I mean, could you imagine Brian Dable with Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold was a reckless quarterback. Carson Wentz is a reckless quarterback. To me, Jackson Dart, like him or hate him, you may look at the recklessness as a problem right now, but as a rookie, and you're learning up into the playbook for average of 6 to 8 weeks, usually for rookie quarterbacks. If Brian Dable doesn't turn something with Jackson Dart, that's where I know Brian Dable would be in trouble. But if he does, and Jackson Dart becomes that name for the Giants, then maybe that 1 year with Russell, the 2 years with Jameis, might not look so bad. Because then you're going to move on from Russell Wilson. You're going to keep up on Jameis Winston because he's a very good locker room chemistry. And then with Jackson Dart, you are going to hope that all of the tangibles he possesses are going to click. Now, does that translate that Joe Shane's job is safe? No. Because to me, Joe Shane, you let arguably your best employee, Saquon Barkley, walk to your arch rival in Philadelphia and win a Super Bowl. You guys have lost sleep over that. So the Giants, I don't see them truthfully making a humongous impact, but I will say this. There are going to be spurts you're going to love with what the offense may look like. Jackson Dart really is the real deal. And I think if he cleans up a lot of those mistakes, because like we talked about with winning quarterbacks in college, to me, just because you were winning in college does not always mean you are going to win in the NFL. Okay? It's just like, you either, whatever your favorite app is to learn a new language, Babbel, I forget the other app too. But the thing is you, like, if you get Babbel, for example, you're going to be learning a new language. You're not going to learn that straight right off the bat. You're only lucky if 2 and 2 go together. But this stuff takes time. So initially, you're trying to learn a new language when you come in the NFL. Because that language that you had in college may not be the same one that's going to translate in the NFL. That's why when people talk about this with Shedeur Sanders, look, you're not even discussing about Shedeur Sanders, the player. You're discussing so much of Shedeur Sanders, the person. To me, I look at the player. Super accurate. To me, he's going to surprise some people. But I thought you all knew that. That's why I'm like with Jackson Dart, and you land him with Brian Dable. Oh, this is going to be better. So expect it and hold your judgments for a later time. Let's go to the news.
This is the Hot Press.
So much stuff cooking up and on the news, I'll tell you. So of course, lots happening. Not so much of just free agencies up on all across all the major sports. However, Chicago has definitely got to be loving it just earlier on today. But the Chicago Bears and GM Ryan Poles, they have agreed to an extension that's going to keep Ryan Poles in Chicago along with Ben Johnson for the next couple of years ahead. Chicago right now, and I truthfully like this, because the fact of the matter is Chicago needed a new identity, period, in this anyway. So I feel like that with Ryan Poles and the moves that he's actually made, these were a lot better moves, and these were culture-changing moves. Because now you get a coach in Ben Johnson who is serious, a guy that is willing to build, and at least for this, he's gonna he did the right thing this offseason. He went and fixed up offensive line. Now you gotta make it work. So he's now responsible in these last few years, because he's only had 2 years left up and on the contract. Now he's signed until 2029, but he's responsible with getting Caleb Williams. He's responsible with getting DJ Moore and getting Darnell Wright, Tyreek Stevenson, Luther Burden, and Torrey Taylor, the punter. So to me, the Bears, and now this is the hard part. I know a lot of people, it's a hard pill to swallow. The fact that they're 15-36 under Ryan Poles. Listen, everybody doesn't quite get the coach right at times, okay? It's okay. It happens. I mean, the Chargers had to go through Anthony Lynn, Brandon Staley before they landed Jim Harbaugh. They know that they needed to go through a culture change. The Bears have had long years since, Lovie Smith and Jay Cutler. They've had to go through John Fox. They've had to go through Matt Nagy. They had to go through Matt Eberflus until they finally got Ben Johnson. And look, Matt Eberflus is a very good defensive-minded coach as a DC, but doesn't quite translate as far as head coaching level. But Ryan Poles, I promise you, like for Chicago fans, that's why they're excited right now, because they know and they realize, look, this stuff is going to take an awful lot of time. But that's where you got to give it you got to give it at least this puppy to cook up, because it's going to be just fine. It's going to be all right. So to me, I think Ryan Poles, he's exactly the answer in Chicago. And I absolutely love this. So we know that the All-Star game is coming up around the corner. It's going to be a fun festivity up from here. Interestingly enough, there's been a change in the home run derby in Atlanta. So Atlanta's own Ronald Acuna is now being replaced by his teammate, Matt Olson, who will be joining into the T-Mobile All-Star Game home run derby for the National League. So instead of Acuna, who will still be starting for the National League in the outfield, Olson is a reserve infielder. But for Olson, he's going to try to become the first Atlanta player to win the home run derby on Monday night. He could become the fourth to win at home, and the All-Star game up on Tuesday night. So, interestingly enough, Matt Olson, who competed in the home run derby back in 2021 with the A's, he was eliminated up and into the first round. The 31-year-old is entering into the weekend with 17 home runs this season. Now, we know the offense has been kind of wonky for Atlanta, not to mention the pitching staff has been kind of interesting as well. But this year's participants we're seeing is Brent Rooker from the A's is joining. Minnesota's Byron Buxton, Tampa's Junior Caminero, Jazz Chisholm of the Yankees, Pittsburgh's O'Neal Cruz, Seattle's Cal Raleigh, and James Wood of Washington. So for Matt Olson to be a part of this, I think this is interesting. And to be honest, I think my money might actually go to either O'Neal Cruz or maybe potentially James Wood. Now, Cal Raleigh has had such an amazing season with over 30 home runs already for Seattle as a DH and catcher. And to me, the home run derby is always a fun festivity every single year. So it's going to be interesting. I'd love watching it, but it should be pretty interesting nonetheless. So Cooper Flagg, by the way, we were talking about this earlier when it came to Dallas with the Mavericks. So Cooper Flagg ends up winning Summer League debut despite uneven showing. So listen, this takes time for this stuff to gel. So the number one overall pick managed to make the most important play in what he described as one of the worst games of my life. So Flagg ended up swooping up and into the weak side to swat away Lakers guard DJ Stewart's driving layup attempt with 1:10 remaining on Thursday night's NBA 2K26 Summer League opener. And so I'm already seeing these flashes. And so Cooper Flagg ended up going 5 for 21 on the field, putting up 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists in his Summer League debut. Listen, just because it ain't exactly with what people like to see, don't brush off the potentiality that Cooper Flagg is that guy that is going to help out any team. So to me, I just look at this as like Cooper Flagg is going to be just fine. So, and again, it may have looked like it was one of the worst in his career, but to me, I don't look at it that way. Because if he's making an impactful play like he did with 1:10 left, that's all he cares about. That's the one thing you got to think about, is because you could be up and on your worst nights, but if you can stay maintained in a game like this, you make an impactful play, that's what really would matter. So to me, I think Cooper Flagg, this is just the debut. Slow down. I think the kid's going to be fine. 10 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. The kid's going to be fine. And you know exactly with what kind of gameplay that he is. He's not going to automatically just be this, ultra savant, that he's just going to basically take the NBA and run with it, okay? This stuff takes time. And especially with the unit that he has with everyone in Dallas, I'm telling you, I think the kid's going to be just fine. So it was actually a pretty decent showing. It wasn't lovely to watch, but that impactful play, was insanity. It was insane. So, yeah, just give this puppy some time. I promise you, you're going to love what you're going to see with the up-and-coming season. All right, that takes care of the news.
This is the Hot Press.
So, going back to I go back to my guest, Nick Fairbanks. My thing with just the growth of just the NHL as a whole, and this is what people have to realize is because, we see this with major sports all the time. Okay, there's always different shifts. There's different eras. There's new players that's coming up and involved. The money's growing. The money's growing bigger. And to me, my feeling about this is this. Hockey in the next few years, they're not going to trump over the NFL. Nobody's going to trump over them. Don't get that thought. But the NBA, like I kept saying, there's going to be a chance of that. But it may only be for a sample size. Because to me, the NBA, what they got to get right is that they need to just cut off some of these games. Because you also now have to be consistent with the time schedule that you're also starting the season on. Because to me, like when they would start up in Halloween, and then by the time you get up into Christmas numbers is the ones that's really good. Because that's where you're already coming up to a wrap with the NFL, and they're all going to watch playoff games. But we know that the seasons start, presents under the tree. Christmas is perfect for the NBA. It really is. That's where the NBA season is ready to start. That's where you now have a lot of your sample sizes of up-and-coming players and also the players from free agency and in the trades that also come around. So, and then at the end, you've got to cut down some of these games when it comes to the playoffs, because why does it need to go to a full 7 in the first round? Cut that off, because it should not get to the 7 unless if you're in the conference finals or in the finals. That's really what it should be. But we also know, too, if you're not going to take the All-Star game seriously, then get rid of it, because nobody's really giving a rip about defense. And outside of the skills competitions, what is it really to play for? There's no home court. There's no home ice. There's no home field advantage anywhere. So what are you really playing for? You're playing for what? Bragging rights for nothing? Not even just for home court of West or Eastern Conference? I mean, you're only giving it to the team that comes out with the best record. That's who gets the home that's who gets the home court. Why not just put some sort of meaning on it? Then you could actually get players who care about it. But I just think if you're not going to care about it, then just get rid of it. The other thing is, too, is because now with the NIL deals, players are coming back for college because they're going to get paid at the same time. That's the opportunity to grow and mature them so that they're ready for the NBA, not a 17, 18-year-old who just came up and out of high school and only spent the 1 year up in college, and now he's way overwhelmed. Okay, this is not LeBron. This is not Kobe. This is not many of these other players in the past. Get over that stuff. These are collegiate athletes that should be respected well as collegiate athletes, and even as collegiate athletes, you need to be consistent and you need to man your own ground. Okay? Don't take a lot of advices from people that that are at least that are family, because in the end, like look at what's happening with Nico, is that you took your father's word when really you should be the one blazing your own trail. You're already up and at that legal age where you should be making your own decisions. So for a lot of these athletes, and I know a lot of people look at Ace Bailey right now, and I know the whole thing. Okay, I know the whole story. But to me, you're going into Utah in a situation and in an environment where this is your opportunity to really build it upon. And that's why Danny Ainge, he's going to really build this thing much similarly like he did with Jason Tatum. I mean, we know what Tatum was, Duke. Okay, so we understand this. But my point is that with hockey, though, however, because a lot of these international studs, they're coming up and into the U.S. soils, and especially even if you want to complain about teams with no state tax, Florida and Vegas, Tampa, They're figuring it out. And at the same time, the whole LTIR loophole, they're already trying to take control of that. But here's the thing, though. Teams know that's like extra money in their pocket. That's like emergency money that they wouldn't even have to use. Okay, my wife and I know about that. So I just think that hockey is in its really good primes, much like the WNBA. The WNBA just needs to put their egos aside when it comes to Caitlin Clark, okay? Because you want her on the Olympic team. You want her to be able to boost your numbers. And the fact that the All-Star game is in Indiana, that's going to boost your numbers. And by the way, you're going to have a secret appearance by Tyrese Halliburton. So what is the problem? And then in hockey, because the fact that we had the Four Nations tournament, the Stanley Cup playoffs always seem to be hard, and they are fun, and it's exciting. And that's the part that you're going to love drinking up out of the cup. Okay? That's what's to savor for. Blood, sweat, and tears. So to me, I just think, and even with these expansion teams, what if there is a revival with the Atlanta Thrashers? That's a possibility. What if there's a revival of the Arizona Coyotes and you have a better owner than the last one that they had and he actually understands? And then you go in other various locations. I know people talked about Houston. I know people talked about certain other areas around in the world or even, in the nation. So why not? And Canada, we know that Canada, it's predominantly their sport. But for the last 30 years, you've been losing at it. That's why eventually you got to get better at this stuff. But Canada, I think the NHL has an opportunity to take advantage of the moment. Major League Baseball is up and in good hands because of the fact of rule changes, time clocks, and then, the postseason is always exciting in October. Nobody is going to watch 162 games a year just so that way then they got through it and now they're up in October. No, they're going to go straight to October. Okay? Listen, even the Tokyo series, the Mexico series, the Williamsport, and now I'm actually excited for the Bristol series, the Speedway series between Atlanta and Cincinnati. Because Bristol, Tennessee, why not? You're going to be playing baseball on a racetrack. And I actually got a chance to look at the uniforms, and man, do they look sick. Man, do I love the clash between NASCAR and MLB. Isn't it just classic? It just goes hand in hand. It's like saying, for many of our country folk up out there, it's like you're talking about whiskey and beer. Why not just have both, And then you're shooting it, you're having a great time, and you're really team building. So I just think about that. So I think hockey's up and in a good situation. NBA just has to get this right. Adam Silver, we know, is trying to make it to where there's no super teams. It's more balanced for a lot of these low market teams. And I get that. That's why Oklahoma City and what they're doing right now. And I was actually going to ask this question earlier, but it kind of slipped my mind. But like Florida, they retained a lot of the players. Did you see how many of these max contracts that they gave? So J-Dub, SGA, and Chet all have max contracts. How are they going to end up paying for it back if either one of them doesn't quite perform better than the other because of the weight of the bag? I mean, it happens, but that's your core three. Oklahoma City has now found the core three. Now, Indiana, it's going to be an interesting story because now you have no Miles Turner. So how they're going to really reflect upon that and how they're really going to end up rebounding is going to be interesting. But you kind of see right now with the state of the NBA, they're trying to make it a balanced platform. But, I mean, it's going to take us some time, but not a whole lot of us are truthfully, just mentally ready for that change. Not a lot of us are. It's hard, but you really got to end up respecting it up from this point. Good stuff. It was such a great week. We had two great guests yesterday, and we had another great guest that I was so happy that we were able to get on to talking about the Florida Panthers, because I just think with the state of hockey now up in Florida, it's thriving, and it's thriving in the right way. And to me, I mean, they're not going to stop anytime soon. They got a great core, just like Oklahoma City. They're taking advantage of it. And so you only have a certain window before you really have to tear this down and start over again. I mean, that's what a lot of these teams do. It's team building for 3 to 5 years, and then you got to tear it down and rebuild again. It just happens. You're lucky enough if you pull off like, a New England 20-year dynasty. I don't even think that would ever happen in this lifetime again, but I'm telling you, it's a one of a kind. It's very, very ultra rare. So, but both those teams that won championships this year, what they're doing is, I think it's something special, but it just tells you how well that it's thriving from here. But man, we had such a great week. Chase will be up and on with us soon, but we will have potentially a backup plan and just a helping out as well. So stay tuned up for that, guys. But appreciate all of you guys for being here on the show and continuing to supporting the show, guys. And remember, leave a review, leave a like, leave 5 stars, whatever it may be. Review us here at thesnakesportstalkshow.com. Link is in the description. Go online, read about us, listen into previous shows and also previous interviews if you didn't get a chance to see it. Also, shop for our best merchandises as well throughout the summer season, because we got some great summer wear as well for you guys to check out at our website at snakesportstalkshow.com, and leave us your guys' reviews and comments. Whatever, all comments are always accepted, guys. But remember, be fair. Appreciate all of you guys for being here up and onto the show, guys. We're signing off. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you guys next week on the Snake Sports Talk Show. And just you wait to see what we have next in store for you guys. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the weekend. See you guys next week.